Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, we're back. The Dirty Dozen returns for another outing to update you all on the top characters in Tacticus. For those of you that have been with me for a while, you'll know that this is my flagship content. It's the series that started my channel off just over a year ago, and I want to pass on my immense gratitude to all of you for being such a pivotal part of my channel's success. I've got a thank you code to give you all, as well as a character giveaway along with some tactical analysis and gameplay. I wouldn't continue to be here without all of you and all of your support since I started doing this. Having recently hit the 9,000 subscriber milestone, I wanted to give you all a code, Nandi over 9,000. It will last for 1 week and is good for 15 Calgar shards as well as 9,000 gold. Stay tuned and make sure you hit that subscribe button so that I can give away more codes as I hit further milestones. On top of that, I'm also doing a giveaway for this video for Exitor Rho, the linchpin to the mechanical team. You'll see over the course of this video why I believe that this team is currently one of the best meta teams in the game. Simply by leaving a comment below, you'll be in for a chance to win one of the prizes. For those of you that are new to the channel, you might be wondering what all the fuss is about. The Dirty Dozen is a tier list that I have put together with collaboration and input from some of the top players in the game. Most are with me in the Alpha Legion Guild, where we regularly compete for the game's top honours. We distill our insights into infographic format so that you can invest your resources wisely and maximise your return. We update the Dirty Dozen every time there is a meta shifting event, usually a guild raid boss. Therefore, with the release of the Avatar of Khaine, we have had new reason to update the standings and show you some gameplay clips to justify our decisions. The big disclaimer here is that we have only really had about a week to collect data and analyse the new boss, so the longer term scores might look different. However, I have pushed this out because I'm keen to provide you with some footage to help you all in your efforts. Before we get onto the infographic, there have been some significant changes into how the characters are scored and the overall rankings calculated. The collaborators that I work with, Tawin, Legend, Waffles, Puntier, K-Stud and Airns all sit down and rank every character in the game on a scale of 1 to 5. The raid boss scores are all averaged together, and then we have a weighting multiplier of 75% applied. This is then added to a war score, which has a weighting of 25%. This then gives each character a combined score, which is used for their final ranking that I tweak based on my own views before bringing you a final product. Is it a perfect system? No, probably not, but the Dirty Dozen is a tier list by nature, and these are always a bit subjective and will suffer from difference of opinion. Hopefully, what I have brought you today continues to maintain the high standards that the product has been since its inception. On to the Dirty Dozen. There are 3 new characters this month that make the Dirty Dozen, all of whom form the core of the mechanical team that has taken over the Tacticus meta. Within each character's cell, you can see the scores for each character against individual raid bosses using a traffic light system. This is the first month that we have seen Eldryon displaced from his perch as King of Tacticus. Ragnar remains an excellent character, and to my initial surprise, has remained an excellent option against the Avatar of Khaine raid boss. His active ability, War Howl, gives him and his motley crew of melee warriors the ability to overcome the movement penalty of the fire hexes, allowing him to chase down the Avatar of Khaine with ease. For reasons that I have gone into previously, War Howl is an immensely powerful ability, and makes Ragnar very potent in Guild War as well. Eldryon drops down to a tied second this month due to 2 reasons. He is not usable against the Avatar of Khaine because he is also an Eldari character, and Eldryon is not as good as his peers in Guild War, which has a larger overall weighting in this edition of the Dirty Dozen. Still, he is going to be best in slot for most guild bosses in the game, and remains an exceptionally powerful character due to his passive ability, Doom. Tied with Eldryon, Calgar works very well in war, but also enjoys being one of the best buffing units in the game through his passive ability. There is no secret science behind the Ultramarine leader. He makes everyone around him better and devastates the battlefield with his active ability. The Adeptus Mechanicus were introduced just after the last Dirty Dozen, and the last few months have been an excuse in learning just how good they are across the board. Exitor Rho is the linchpin of the team, being a force multiplier through his passive ability and allowing you to attack enemies multiple times with the right supporting cast. In this clip you can see how with the right setup, Exitor Rho can demolish even a legendary 5 boss. We bait him down to the low ground on the right of the map, and then pin him in place with our admechs. You obviously need to hit the minimum armor threshold for the enemy boss not to completely destroy your team, but once you've done that, you get to treat the supposed toughest boss in this rotation like a piece of meat. This season, our biggest hitters are averaging at around 850k damage per ticket, which is close to double what non-mechanical teams are managing against this boss. Rayvas comes in at position 5. She is a powerful multi-hitter and does reasonably well against most bosses. However, she is also incredibly valuable in Guild War, where the enemy AI will often run into your active Overwatch and simply die. Guild War has become harder and harder as the defensive side have been able to gain more advantages. Characters like Rayvas who punch up really easily are few and far between, and I think she's a good choice if you want to score some easy wins in every war. Tangida is in 6th place and is an enabler for the Mech team and specifically Exitor Rho. On his own he's fairly average, but where he gains his value is by summoning the Skitari and getting them to attack multiple times in one turn through his active ability. His active is also useful simply for bringing up the team's armor and enabling you to tank boss attacks with ease. Actus is next, another new addition, and lets you get more attacks from your mechanical team to enable Exitor Rho. In this clip against the Silent King Necron guild boss, you can see how Actus lets Rayvas make multiple high ground and marker light buffed attacks in one round to not only deal huge damage to the boss, but also trigger Exitor Rho for extra strikes of damage. Onshi remains powerful for the versatility that his active offers. You'll be familiar with how he recharges the active ability for Bellator, allowing you to overwhelm and surround the basic Tyranid bosses. However, more recently Onshi has also seen his stock rise for being able to recharge Ragnar's active. In guild raids, this lets you hit the Rogel Dorn rear armor twice with explosive damage and critical hits. Against the Avatar of Khaine, it also gives you 2 opportunities to bypass his flame hex walls and remaneuver to advantageous positions. Once the greatest damage dealer in the game, Morgan Ra has seen his stock fall with the rise of Ragnar and the Admechs. He still works reasonably well as a multi-hitter. If you combine him with Eldryon and some other damage buffers, you'll still end up with a pretty good workable team. It's just that Ra, sadly, is not best in slot anymore. Bellator is tied for 10th position, and I really like how this starter character holds his value even in the late game. The main uses for Bellator are surrounding guild bosses like the Hive Tyrant and Gazgul. His summons are useful in Guild War too, as a means of distracting the enemy target priority and being reasonably durable. My beloved Sho is in 10th. The character that drew me to Tacticus in the first place is a fine ranged damage dealer that does okay across the board in guild raids. He is pretty good with the Admechs because he can add up to 4 hits every turn through his sniper drones. I quite like him in Guild War because of his high damage pierce ranged attacks that shred through enemy characters. In 12th place is Aethana. She flies around the map providing a valuable critical hit buff and damage to allies within 2 hexes. Aethana is best against Rogel Dorn, giving your units more critical hit chance and letting you stack up the damage with guaranteed criticals against the boss's rear armor. As viewers, you have also asked for the top 30 characters to be included in my Dirty Dozen rankings, so I've got them here on screen. Hopefully the legend and layout is easy enough to understand. I wanted to point out a few things. Abraxas is actually tied for 12th place. He plays in the Psyker team alongside the Neurothrope and is one of the linchpins of that team. I think that this slide sadly demonstrates one of the weaknesses of my ranking or tier list system. The Psyker team or the Neurothrope team is one of the best in the game. However, because the Neurothrope is unusable against the Tyranid bosses, it costs its ranking significantly. Just recognise that the Psyker team, which I'll show you some footage of later, does really well against a lot of bosses and primes. They're worth building even if they don't make the top 12. The Neurothrope or Psyker team dovetails nicely into the next segment. You're probably looking at this list and trying to get a feel for who to build or where to focus your resources next. It's sadly not as simple as taking the top 5 characters in the list and making a team around them. Teams are more than the sum of their parts, and you want to focus on a single core team at a time. You'll get much more value out of that rather than dipping into 3 teams at once. We'll go over the 3 best meta teams on this slide. The flavour of the month is the Mech team. When the team is good, they're excellent and easily outperform other meta teams by a considerable margin against certain bosses. It consists of a core of Exitor Rho, Actus, and Tangida, and adds 2 characters depending on the boss or situation. You saw in my gameplay clip that I used Eldryon and Sho against the level 5 Screamer Killer. Other options could potentially include Rayvas or Aleph Null in those slots. What about the Psyker team? Another very powerful team that centers around the Neurothrope, Abraxas, and Yazagor. The idea is to build up stacks using Abraxas before unloading high amounts of damage in the later turns with Neurothrope's passive ability. The final slots for this team are flexible, with Ahriman, Roswitha, Eldryon, or Vitruvius all being reasonable options. The appeal for this team, unlike the Mech team, which is all Imperial, is that the badges and orbs are fairly evenly distributed among the factions in the game. I'll call the final team the multi-hitter team, and essentially takes us back to the basics of building a team. You want characters with lots of hits to take advantage of damage buffers in order to defeat enemies. Previously, this team included Moggan Ra to go alongside Eldryon, Calgar, or Ethana. Now, Moggan Ra has largely been replaced by Ragnar. The nice thing about this team, while more traditional, is that its pieces are easier to replace without the whole team falling apart. The Mech team doesn't really work without the core 3 AdMechs. Here, if you are missing Ragnar, you can swap in Moggan Ra. If you're missing Ra, you can swap in Revas. If you're missing Ethana, you can try Thaddeus or Darkstrider. There is a lot of flexibility, and for newer players, I think that this is still the core concept or the core team that I would recommend building. The Avatar of Khaine is currently the newest guild boss and brings his own set of challenges. It looks like there have been some changes in the AI for the Avatar of Khaine between the showcase video and the version that we have in the game. Most crucially, it does not seem that he follows a fixed turn order like previously demonstrated. He is more likely to use his active ability, Wrath of Khaine Unleashed. What does this mean? Well, the mechanical team, which relies so heavily on summons, is less useful than we initially thought. It's still a serviceable team, but probably not the top team. You can see here how after the Avatar of Khaine uses Wrath of Khaine Unleashed, our summons are decimated and we no longer have the resources to continue fighting. Well, who does work? Ragnar and friends do a passable job. You'll know by now that this season there have been issues with the Avatar of War guild replays. So, one of my guildmates, Guangxi, has very kindly put together this footage here for us to peruse. Here you can see how Ragnar, Ulf, Calgar, Bellator, and Onshi form a 5-man team that is able to work around the Flame Hex movement impedance. Our melee characters secure the high ground and are able to hang on to it as the Avatar charges up for the Wrath of Khaine Unleashed. Bellator's summons are reasonably tanky and able to survive that initial blast, while the main damage dealers hang on to the high ground up on the top right. Onshi then recharges Bellator's active ability and allows us to unload with even more Inceptors onto the guild boss. The rest of the battle is fairly unexciting. You'll see the Inceptors chasing around the Guardian summons, while our main damage dealers continue to take advantage of Calgar's passive and the high ground hexes. The battle finishes with a damage total of just under 400,000, which I think is fairly reasonable for a first season fighting a new boss. There is even more footage and strategy to share. In this clip shared with me by Vander from the Immortal Legio Guild, you can see a successful run with the Neuroparasite or Psyker team. The premise with this team is to build up Neuroparasite stacks using a bunch of Psykers before allowing the Neurothrope to deal large amounts of damage in the later turns of battle. Ahriman and Roswitha are the flex characters for this core team. Ahriman is a natural fit as his active ability does an increasing number of hits based on the amount of flame hexes on the map. With the Avatar of Khaine generating flame hexes at will, there is a reasonable amount of damage potential here. Ahriman's active is also recharged by killing the guardians that summon in the corners of the map. Ahriman's passive ability also increases your team's overall damage output. Roswitha is also a nice fit because her active ability increases the amount of damage taken by the guild boss by 20% for a short spell. When you see the Avatar of Khaine charge up with Wrath of Khaine Unleashed, this team isn't as troubled by the fact that the summons get destroyed, because the purpose of the summons in this particular setup is simply to add Neuroparasite stacks. After they have done that job, it's no great loss for them to die, as the stacks have already been added and the Neuroparasite continues to tick forward towards its doomsday clock. There's not a huge amount else to say or add here. The Neuroparasite has managed to add its stacks onto the Avatar of Khaine, and therefore in the later turns you'll see massive damage output as indicated by the mouse over damage on the Avatar himself. This particular run finishes out at around 400,000 damage, and by Vander's own admission, there are several things that he could improve to increase the damage numbers further. That's all I've got for today. A massive thank you to my collaborators again, without whom none of this would be possible. If you'd like to support me and my work, I'd love if you could consider entering my referral code as shown on screen. It earns you 100 blackstone, but is single use, so choose who you support carefully. Bye for now.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!